What's going on, CDL fans, and welcome back to the Jake Maverik Show. Today, I want to talk about 4 different topics, those topics being my general thoughts and recap of Major 2, why I think OpTic can't beat FaZe so far this season, roster changes heading into Major 3 or Split 3, and also the Scrap versus Drazah BEEF I'm sure we've all seen on the timeline after the event. And as always, you can use the timestamps in the description or just the YouTube timeline at the bottom to skip the different topics if you want to see me talk about something specific and you're not interested in the rest of the video. But I will start off with just my overall thoughts and recap of Major 2. Major 2, honestly, was probably one of the better events we've seen in a pretty long time. I thought a lot of these matches were super entertaining. Every day sort of had something really cool going on, some possible upsets, some upsets we actually did end up seeing. And overall, I really enjoyed every single day of the Major. You know, FaZe looked really, really good. I actually thought OpTic looked like the best team at the Major up until Sunday, where FaZe was the only team to beat OpTic at the LAN. And obviously that meant they went on to go win the entire event. A few of the biggest shocks for me at Major 2. Number 1 was my LA Thieves going out top 12. Like most people, I had LAT making the top 6 at this event with the Las Vegas Legion, who also didn't make top 6, which was pretty interesting. But LAT were 1 round away from 3-0ing Atlanta FaZe in winners round 1. They absolutely choked the Invasion defense round 11 in map 2, which would have led them to 3-0ing because obviously they ended up winning the HP and they won the control. It was just super disappointing to watch that. I don't know what their setup was on that Invasion defense. It made no sense to me. We pretty much just gave up B-bomb and they got pretty much a complete free plant. And then from there, it's just really hard to retake. So that was super disappointing as a Thieves fan. Another thing that surprised me was Toronto Ultra going out top 4. We did see the top 4 all make top 4, which I think was expected. But for me, I kind of thought Ultra were going to bounce back and have a bit of a better showing on LAN than they were kind of showing online in the Major 2 qualifiers, especially considering how good they were at Major 1. But I think this just goes to show you how up and down Call of Duty can be with new spawns, different map pool coming in for Major 2. We saw Ultra kind of struggle, which was surprising, like I said. But New York Subliners, OpTic, Texas, and Atlanta FaZe all looked stronger than they did at Major 1, in my opinion, which could go to show why Ultra went out top 4. I mean, Ultra as a whole just didn't look great. Scrap looked incredible, as he always does. Kleenex looked really good here and there, but they also looked like, you know, kind of average in other maps. And then Envoy and Insight, honestly, just did not have a great event, in my opinion, which sucks to see because both of those guys, I love watching them play, especially when they're playing at top form. Insight was amazing at Major 1. Envoy is obviously really good. Insight really good as well a majority of the time. But both of those guys really struggled at the Major, which was pretty disappointing. And then the last thing that honestly really surprised me was the LA Gorillas. I mean, the Gorillas were 1-6 online. They did beat Atlanta FaZe in their last online qualifier, so we obviously, you know, shouted them out for that. But they had won, I believe it was 6 maps in total online. And then they came to LAN. They beat LA Thieves. They really just showed out and were able to get another top 6. That's back-to-back top 6s at Major 1 and Major 2, which is pretty crazy for the LA Gorillas. A team that everyone thinks should make a roster change. Maybe they still should, because obviously, you know, getting top 6 at LAN is great, but you probably want to start in winner's bracket, so you got to do good online as well. But honestly, I kind of bet they're not going to make a roster change because, like I said, you got top 6 back-to-back. I would imagine you think that you could probably do that again at Major 3. But on the whole, I would say Major 2 was super entertaining. It kind of went the way we sort of thought it would. I mean, at the very least, the top 4 were the top 4. They were the ones playing on Sunday, which is probably what a majority of people had in their brackets and their predictions. But obviously, the LAG causing some upsets, Carolina Royal Ravens causing some upsets. I mean, Miami Heretics hasn't won a map on LAN. I think maybe some people, especially at their home Major in Miami, thought they would at least win a map. So there was some pretty interesting storylines and things that we didn't expect and things that we did expect. And as a whole, I really enjoyed Major 2. I watched partied Saturday and Sunday here on the channel, and they were my 2 best streams by far that I've had so far. So major shout out to everybody who was in the watch parties. I really appreciate you guys being there. It was really, really dope, and I can't wait to watch party Major 3 qualifiers as we get there in a couple weeks. But now I want to move on to my next topic, which is why OpTic Texas can't beat Atlanta FaZe. That's likely the title of this video because I think that's kind of the most polarizing topic we could talk about in today's video. And I went around and I got some stats to sort of give you an explanation as to why, or give you some evidence as to why I think OpTic has not been able to beat FaZe so far. Obviously, as we know, in recent years, OpTic has always had FaZe's number. They're like 10-1 against FaZe and Vanguard and MW2 combined. They've always been really, really good against FaZe, where FaZe has always been good against everyone else. They just had not been able to beat OpTic, but they got rid of Slasher. They brought on Drazah, and they're now 5-0 versus OpTic so far this season. It's pretty crazy to think that we've seen FaZe and OpTic play each other 5 times already this season, and we're only halfway through the year. I mean, I say only. We're halfway through the year, which is pretty crazy. But halfway through the season, we've seen them play 5 times. We're definitely going to see them probably play another handful of times this season, which is really exciting. And, you know, it's the most marquee storyline we have right now, obviously with Envy no longer in the league, having merged with OpTic. OpTic versus FaZe is exactly what everyone wants to see. And despite it being 5-0, and also despite it being a 16-5 map count in favor of FaZe so far this season, they actually have been really good matches and have been really close maps. Like I said, it's a 16-5 map count in favor of FaZe, which is really crazy across 5 series. OpTic are averaging 1 map win per series when you think about it that way, which is really crazy. But I went about through the scoreboards, and I did a little bit of math and found the average score for each game mode when these teams play each other so far this season. In Hardpoint, the average score is 242 to 227 in favor of FaZe. So very, very close, right? Less than 20 points, about a 15-point difference in the average score for FaZe versus OpTic in Hardpoint. In SND, the average score is 6-4, and in Controlled, the average score is 3-2. So when you look at it, the average score in Hardpoint is about 15 to 20 points. The average score in SND is about 2 rounds, and the average score in Control is 1 round. So these maps are coming down to the wire almost every single time these teams play each other on average, which goes to show you that OpTic are a good team. They're keeping up with FaZe, but for whatever reason, they're not able to close out maps and close out series and get these victories on the board. And so why I personally think this is happening, and I'm sure why a lot of you out there and a lot of other people will say, is simply OpTic are getting heavily outslayed when they play Atlanta FaZe. OpTic are keeping these maps as close as they are, despite going negative across the board over almost every single time, which for one goes to show the teamwork and the communication that OpTic has, right? To be able to keep maps that close, especially in respawn, when you're getting outslayed, is a credit to how good the teamwork of a team is. But if they were able to get more kills, I really do think this OpTic Texas team could be taking down FaZe. I did the math, and FaZe are currently outslaying OpTic by an average of 40 kills per series, which is quite a lot, right? 40 kills is a lot across the entirety of a series. The total numbers are FaZe have 1,565 kills, and OpTic have 1,366 kills across the 5 series, which when you do the math, like I said, comes out to an average of 40 kills per series. FaZe are outslaying OpTic, which I think is just a very large chunk and goes to show you why OpTic aren't winning. Of course, kills are not everything in Call of Duty. Like I said, OpTic are getting outslayed pretty heavily, and they're still keeping these maps close. I really do think, especially down the stretch of a game, if OpTic are able to pick up a few more kills here and there later in games, like I just said, I really do think they can start closing out more maps, especially respawns, against Atlanta FaZe, and kind of find themselves finally start beating FaZe again like we saw in recent years. And of course, as all things in Call of Duty, there is nuance when it comes to why a team is being outslayed, right? It could be a variety of different factors. It could be it could just be straight up gunny, right? Like maybe FaZe just have better gunny, which I feel like we probably would all agree on average FaZe do have better gunny than OpTic, right? I mean, Simp, Beezy, Celium, Drazah probably is the strongest gun skill team we have in the league, right, on paper. It could be teamwork and just how well teams are playing for trades. Like I said, I think OpTic's teamwork is really, really good, but maybe they're not necessarily focused on playing for trades or playing together as much as maybe they are moving on rotations and finding gaps and making plays, finding flank routes. So maybe OpTic need to play a little bit more together and focus more on trades. It could also just be a map set thing. Maybe the map sets they end up playing against OpTic or they end up playing against FaZe. Maybe OpTic's strong maps are also FaZe's strong maps, which lead to just differences in comfort on the map when they're playing FaZe versus other teams, which is why they're getting outslayed. There's a lot of different factors that can play into the slaying difference we're seeing across FaZe versus OpTic. So for me, I really do think if OpTic can find a way to get 5, 10, 20 more kills a series, which can seem like a lot or not a lot, depending on how you look at it, if they can find a way, especially late in games, just get a couple more key kills on like the last 1 or 2 rotations in a hard point, or a couple key kills in the last round of a control. I really do think OpTic can start beating Atlanta FaZe consistently this season. If you have any thoughts about that, definitely let me know in the comments. For me, I do think the slaying factor is a big one when it comes to OpTic versus FaZe, because we see how close these maps are when they're getting this outslayed. So let me know if you have any thoughts on this. But I want to talk about roster changes heading into Major 3, right? We're heading into the second half of the season, the second half of the regular season, I guess I should say. We still have 3 events, Major 3, Major 4, and Champs. But Champs isn't a part of the regular season, right? Not all 12 teams are going to be there. So for all the teams that want to make Champs, they really need to focus on the roster changes they can make now for the second half of the year to qualify for Champs. Looking at the season standings, which I have up on my second monitor, currently, Seattle Surge, Miami Heretics, LA Thieves, and Boston Breach are sitting outside the top 8, meaning that they would not make Champs if Champs qualification was to end today. But for me, I honestly think there are a couple tiers that come with roster changes currently in the CDL heading into Major 3. I think you have your don't make a change tier, your could make a change but might not, and you definitely need to make a change tier, and we're going to go through those real quick. Tier number 1 is obviously just the top 4. They're not going to make a change. FaZe, OpTic, New York, and Ultra. They're going to stick it out. They're likely going to stick it out the entire season, which I think we all know and expect. Tier number 2, I think, is the teams that might not make a change, but you definitely could argue could make a change. And I do think there's 3 teams in this tier. Number 1 is the Carolina Royal Ravens. They just got top 6 at the Major. They got top 8, I believe, at Major 1. They've proven to be better on land, especially the likes of Fellow has gotten much better on land. Same thing with Clayster. Gwyn has been good all year long. I think Tej has also been pretty solid. This is a team that could make a change. Clay and Fellow have not been performing well online. You could look to bring in another AR, or maybe you make a 2-man change to try and, strengthen this team on land so you can get some more wins on land, which is more CDL points, as well as get yourself into winner's bracket for the Major, giving yourself more than one chance to possibly progress through the tournament. And then the same thing I said for Ravens goes for the next team, which is the LA Gorillas, a team that is performing well on land, but not performing well online. As much as LAN is more important than online, you do want to make winner's bracket, right? You want to give yourself that fallback in case you do lose, especially because you're likely probably playing a top 4 team in winners round 1, which is going to be really difficult to beat. I do think this team could look at making a change, maybe getting rid of Assault, who has been pretty slow and not really performing that well, but he shows out on land. So that's why I do think they're in this tier of maybe could stick. And then the last team is the Las Vegas Legion. Out of these 3 teams, honestly, this is a team I think should stick the most. Online, they looked really good. On land, they still looked solid, but they definitely struggled a little bit. We saw Attach have a bad series. We saw Purge have bad maps. We saw Nero make some really questionable decisions in Search and Destroys especially. This is a team, though, that I do think showed significant progress from Major 1 to Major 2. And I do think can continue to show that progress going into Major 3. And now for the other tier is obviously every other team, right? I think Minnesota Rocker, you got to make a change. I think Awakening has to go. Maybe Vivid also has to go. But at the very least, I think you get rid of Awakening. He just has not been good this year. He's in the bottom of almost every single stat category. And obviously, numbers aren't everything. But when you're at the bottom of almost every category, I think that is enough of proof that maybe you need to make a change. The Seattle Surge obviously definitely need to make a change. I mean, what else do I really need to say about them? Ever since they benched Illy, they just have not been good. I know there's a lot behind the scenes in that situation that we don't know of, most likely. But we can only look at what they're doing in game when it comes to this sort of topic. And I think they obviously are going to have to make a change. Miami Heretics, I mean, they haven't won a map on land. Despite being able to make winners bracket both majors, they have not won a single map on land. They are 0-12. They obviously need to make a change, whether they stick with their Spanish roster or not. There are Spanish challengers players they could look to bring in. They obviously just released Journey officially, who was on their bench. They Real's Visa, who is their substitute player, just got approved. So I do think we see them make a change. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3 players. Who really knows with them? My LA Thieves, I definitely think they make a change. I do think Afro is going to be benched. Maybe Joe Deceives comes back in. Maybe you look to bring in a different challengers player. 04, who just won the most recent event at Miami in challengers, was playing with Dan Ghosty on stream recently. So maybe we see someone like him come in. But I do think they're going to make at least a one-person change, the LA Thieves. And then last but not least, the Boston Breach. They got to make it. They got to make a change too. I mean, they're dead last in the standings. I don't think Priest and Slasher are going to work together as an AR duo as much as I like both of those guys. And I think they both had extreme success, honestly, in recent years. Both of them winning majors a lot of the time, honestly, in recent years. I think maybe you look to bring in someone else. And it's been talked about a lot, and I think I'm starting to agree. I think you got to send Snoopy down the challengers, and you got to bring in someone that could have an impact and be consistent. Now, as much as I think Snoopy has potential, and I think he could have a high ceiling, you're halfway through the season. You really got to focus on making champs. And I just don't know if there's enough time to continue coaching and trying to progress Snoopy at the pro level. I think you send him down to challengers, let him play down there, let him find himself, learn how to make better decisions, learn how to not throw away his life more often. And then you can bring him up maybe next year heading into Black Ops Gulf War. But for now, I think you make a one, if not two-person change if you're the Boston Breach. I really do think we're going to see at minimum 4 teams make a change heading into Major 3. It should probably end up being more. We will see what teams, like I said, the Ravens and LAG end up doing. But I do think we're going to see a lot of changes, which I'm excited for because I want to see some new players in the league again. It's cool seeing rookies, man. Like, as much as I like seeing these guys that we've seen bounced in and out of the league all the time come back in and try to reprove themselves. I mean, we saw with Kismet, a guy who was bounced out of the league for a minute, come back and really solidify himself as like a star player in the league. Of course, it's possible, but I do think it's cool to see rookies and sort of see what the future of the league could look like. And I think it's cool to just try some unknown variables and maybe you find a hit like a Pred, like a Scrap down there in Challengers right now that could be really good in the league. And then last but not least for today's show, I want to talk about the Scrap versus Drazah beef we saw after Major 2. On stage, if you didn't see, I mean, I'll give you a quick little recap. If on stage after FaZe won Major 2, Drazah called out Scrappy and was like, where's he at? Like, is he already going home? Like, and then they got into it on Twitter a little bit. Both of their significant others, Scrap's girlfriend and Drazah's wife, I believe they are married, right? So Drazah's wife were going at it on Twitter as they have done previously in the year. These guys obviously have a little bit of drama building up throughout this season, and it really teed off on Twitter after the event. In my opinion, number one, I think the beef is good, right? It's obviously entertaining. It's good for the scene. It gets people talking. And as a whole, I think that's what sets COD apart from a lot of other esports. We really do have personalities that aren't afraid to speak their mind, which I think is really good. But on the flip side of things, the whole like going after each other's significant others, their girlfriends and wives getting into the drama, I think is a little bit much, right? Like, and especially when you start throwing personal attacks, like Scrap's girlfriend said something about Drazah's wife and his kid, which I think is just a little bit too far. You don't have to start bringing like kids into this. But then they just start going after each other for their age, their looks, like all sorts of different things, which I think is just like kind of petty, a little far. And for keeping it real, 9 times out of 10, these people are not going to say anything or do anything in person to each other. They're just going to talk all their talk on Twitter, which as much as it's entertaining, it's kind of like, what's the point when in person, these people are all probably just going to avoid each other when it comes to LAN time. But like I said, I really like the drama. Like, I think it's super entertaining. The more drama, the better in COD, honestly. I think it is what sets our esport apart. But the girlfriends, the wives, significant other, I mean, even if you're just a friend of a pro player, you have to understand what you put online and what you say is a representation of that player and their team. So you really have to be careful with the things you say and do online and in person when you're affiliated to some extent with a pro player and an organization, which maybe people don't realize, or maybe, you know, a lot of people in the league are young. Some people are 18, 19, 20, right? In their mid to lower 20s, where people maybe aren't fully matured yet and don't understand the implications of what they do online when you're in such a public space. So I do think there's a level of that maybe needs to be taught to these players, some more media training, and then they can, you know, rub that off on their significant others and their friends for what they should and shouldn't be doing online. I like the beef. I like the drama. I'm here for it. It's great for the storylines. At the end of the day, I don't know how deep it really is, right? I mean, Drazah had beef with the Atlanta FaZe guys for years, and here they are teaming and winning events together, right? So I think at the end of the day, like, these guys will probably end up teaming together next season or something, or at some point in their careers. So the beef isn't all that serious. But I think the significant others definitely need to be careful about getting involved in it. And then bringing in people's kids and family and stuff like that, I just think is stupid and too far. It's just not a good showing for yourself when you started saying things about trapping people with having a kid with them and all that sorts of thing. Whether you believe it or not, whether it's true or not, I just think we keep it off the internet. There's no need to say it. I think it's just a better look for yourself overall. That's just my take on the situation. I'd love to know what you guys think about this whole beef in the comments, because I would guess this is not the last we're going to see of it. Atlanta FaZe and Toronto Ultra do play each other in the Major 3 qualifiers, so that's going to be entertaining for sure. We'll see who ends up winning that and then what ends up coming after that. But let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments. This is episode 2 of the Jake Maverik Show. I'm not really going to be numbering these episodes. It is just for fun and a way for me to sort of talk about different things that are going on that I want to talk about and maybe you guys want to hear me talk about. If you have topics, questions, comments, things you want to hear me talk about in a future episode or a future video, drop them in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, Discord. All those links are down below. I respond to all my DMs and my messages. I'm not that big, right? I'm not getting that many messages and comments and stuff like that. So I will respond to you at the very least. So I look forward to hearing from you guys, knowing your thoughts on some of the things I talked about in this video. And yeah, with all that being said, hopefully I'll see you in the next one.